Welcome to Biden Brief. The content of the briefing includes: Special counsel delivers Trump a Biden attack line on a silver platter. Solar company CubicPV scraps plans for U.S. silicon wafer factory. The lone man standing between Donald Trump and a Nevada victory, Ryan Binkley. U.S. bid to curb Iranian oil bedeviled by economic, election risks. As Nikki Haley tours California, even some of her most ardent supporters don't see a path. Special counsel delivers Trump a Biden attack line on a silver platter. Yahoo! Joe Biden's decision to not run for president, despite his age, could be a major mistake. That is the conclusion of an article in The Guardian. It notes that Biden would be 78 years old when he would take office if he won the nomination in 2020. This would make him the oldest president in U.S. history, beating the current record held by Donald Trump. The article also points out that Biden's age could be a liability in a presidential race against Trump, who is 72. Solar company CubicPV scraps plans for U.S. silicon wafer factory. Yahoo! Solar energy equipment manufacturer CubicPV has canceled plans to build a major silicon wafer factory in the U.S. due to declining product prices and increasing construction costs. The move is a setback to the Biden administration's goal of creating a solar energy supply chain to meet growing demand. China currently produces 98% of the world's wafers. CubicPV, which is partly backed by Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures, had aimed to lead domestic wafer manufacturing with the completion of a 10 gigawatts factory this year. The company will instead pivot to constructing panels. The lone man standing between Donald Trump and a Nevada victory, Ryan Binkley. Yahoo! Ryan Binkley, a businessman and pastor from Texas, is still running for the Republican presidential nomination, despite his support nationwide being so minuscule it doesn't register in most national polls. In Nevada, he hovers around 1%. Binkley believes he is supposed to run for president and keep sharing his message. He has carried on, despite knee-buckling his chances at introducing himself to voters nationally, perhaps irreversibly. "I know what the odds are," he said. "I know it's a slingshot in the hand of God. But I feel led to keep sharing." When he speaks with undecided voters, he encourages them to pray about it. Binkley says he disagrees with Trump on several issues. He thinks Trump relied too heavily on executive orders to push his agenda. He believes that if Trump is the eventual Republican nominee, he feels like he's supposed to support Trump. He says he won't mount an independent campaign, he'll drop out and endorse the former president. Binkley believes that Trump would do a better job than President Biden, and energy independence would help boost the economy. U.S. bid to curb Iranian oil bedeviled by economic, election risks. Bloomberg. The Biden administration wants to tighten the screws on Iran's oil sales to neutralize its support for militants in the Middle East. But squeezing too hard risks inflicting higher prices on both a sluggish global economy and President Joe Biden's looming election rematch with Donald Trump. As Nikki Haley tours California, even some of her most ardent supporters don't see a path. Yahoo! Nikki Haley had barely taken to the makeshift riser Wednesday at the Wild Goose Tavern in Costa Mesa when the interruption started. "You already lost, Nikki," a Donald Trump supporter shouted, prompting security to shuffle the men outside. As the saloon door opened, a blast of chants and boos from Trump protesters outside filled the room. "Don't ever get upset at people like this," Haley said over the noise, sidestepping the incident with the practiced comfort of a politician who has navigated similar situations before. "My husband is deployed right now. And they sacrifice their lives every day for us to have the ability for them to do that, to have freedom of speech. So we should never be upset at that." The crowd of about 100 people cheered, and Haley gracefully moved on with her stump speech. But as Haley toured California this week, drumming up votes and donor dollars, the incident highlighted her campaign's biggest challenge, overtaking former President Trump. U.S. lawmakers accuse VC firms of funding Chinese military-linked firms. Yahoo! Sequoia Capital China, Qualcomm Ventures, and 3 other U.S. venture capital firms have invested at least $3 billion in Chinese technology companies that allegedly support the Chinese military, and its repression of minorities in Xinjiang, according to a U.S. congressional report released on February 8. The report also scrutinizes investments made by GGV Capital, GSR Ventures, and Walden International in Chinese semiconductor and artificial intelligence firms. The committee called on the Biden administration to restrict U.S. investment in Chinese firms sanctioned by the U.S. government over their ties to the military or repression of minorities, and urged it to extend recent curbs on U.S. investment in China to include further sectors. Candidate for NC Treasurer, Democrat Gabe Esparza, answers our questions. Yahoo! Gabe Esparza, a Democrat running for the position of North Carolina State Treasurer, has highlighted the state pension fund as the biggest issue he would shape if elected. Esparza criticized the current treasurer for underperforming and shifting the burden of funding current payout liabilities to taxpayers, risking the state's AAA credit rating. He also expressed concern over the current treasurer's track record on pension fund performance, ranking last in the U.S. over the past 5 years. Esparza proposed shifting an additional $10 billion of cash into higher return investment vehicles and creating an in-state investment mandate. Listen live as Supreme Court hears arguments on whether Trump is eligible to run for president. Yahoo! The Supreme Court in the United States is hearing arguments over whether Donald Trump is ineligible to run for a second term due to his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Last year, Colorado's Supreme Court ruled that Trump violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which bars an individual who swore an oath to support the Constitution, and then engaged in insurrection, from holding federal or state office again. Trump appealed this ruling, arguing that Section 3 doesn't apply to presidents, and that only Congress can remove candidates from ballots. Trump's lawyers will argue that the president is not an officer of the United States, and that he did not engage in insurrection, amongst other points. Trump himself is not expected to attend the hearing, instead spending the day at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Supreme Court seems skeptical of kicking Trump off election ballot during landmark hearing. Full coverage. Yahoo! The U.S. Supreme Court has heard arguments in a landmark case that could determine whether former President Donald Trump is ineligible to run for a second term because of his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The case centers around Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which bars an individual who swore an oath to support the Constitution, and then engaged in insurrection, from holding federal or state office. Last year, Colorado's Supreme Court ruled that Trump violated this section. Trump appealed the ruling to the Supreme Court, arguing that Section 3 doesn't apply to presidents, and that only Congress can remove candidates from ballots. Both conservative and liberal Supreme Court justices expressed skepticism during the oral arguments. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, a liberal, questioned whether Section 3 applied to presidents, while conservative Justice Samuel Alito said that only Congress could decide whether a person who engaged in insurrection could run for office. The conservative justices also challenged the plaintiff's lawyer, Jason Murray, on the consequences of Colorado removing Trump from the ballot. Justice Neil Gorsuch said that Congress should decide the matter, while Chief Justice John Roberts called the idea that individual states could block candidates from appearing on a ballot a daunting prospect. Trump set to win Nevada's delegates after Haley humiliation. Yahoo! Donald Trump is expected to win all of Nevada's delegates in the Republican presidential nominating caucuses, moving closer to becoming the party's White House candidate. The caucuses, organized by the Trump-friendly Nevada Republican Party, come 2 days after a state-run primary election which saw a humiliating defeat for Nikki Haley, Trump's last remaining rival for the Republican presidential nomination. Haley, a former UN ambassador, is refusing to quit the race, a move which has infuriated Trump. Nevada's population can swing to either party and play a significant role in November's presidential election. After vote-blocking Mayorkas' impeachment, Representative Mike Gallagher faces GOP backlash at home. Yahoo! Republican U.S. Representative Mike Gallagher is facing criticism from fellow Republicans in his district and around Wisconsin for his vote against impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Gallagher joined 3 other Republicans and every Democrat on February 22 in voting against impeaching Mayorkas for his handling of the U.S.-Mexico border. Gallagher argued Mayorkas' actions have not risen to the level of crimes necessary for impeachment, and warned impeachment could set a precedent for future administrations. Ditch the rules-based international order. Bloomberg. The term rules-based international order, RBIO, is increasingly being criticized for being hypocritical and ineffectual. The U.S. invokes it selectively and does not sign up to many international treaties. Its use by the U.S. and its allies is viewed with suspicion by countries in Africa, Asia, and South America, who are being pressured into choosing sides against Russia and China. By replacing the RBIO with a focus on international law, the U.S. would be forced to hold all countries accountable to the same standards, including itself and its allies. Marianne Williamson ends long-shot presidential bid as Democratic challenger. Yahoo! Marianne Williamson has suspended her campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination after poor showings in the New Hampshire and South Carolina primaries. Williamson, who has never held elected office, also ran for president in 2020. She criticized Democrats for pushing an anti-Trump narrative in the 2024 campaign and suggested that former President Donald Trump would win the 2024 general election. Williamson presented herself as a progressive candidate, echoing some of the platforms Senator Bernie Sanders, independent Vermont, ran on in 2016. In his second mix-up this week, Biden talks about meeting with dead European leaders. Yahoo! President Joe Biden made a gaffe at a campaign event in New York, twice referring to the late German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, instead of former Chancellor Angela Merkel. This comes after Biden confused François Mitterrand, the former French president who died in 1996, with French President Emmanuel Macron at an event in Nevada. Biden's likely 2024 opponent, former President Donald Trump, has also had recent slip-ups. An NBC News poll conducted last month found that 76% of voters, including half of Democrats, have concerns about Biden's mental and physical health. The Biden admin is weighing executive action to deter illegal migration at the border. Yahoo! The Biden administration is considering unilateral measures to discourage illegal migration across the southern border, as it is unlikely Congress will pass any legislation on border security. The plans have been under consideration for months, and may upset some progressives in Congress. However, Democratic mayors who have asked for more federal help to handle the influx of migrants in their cities would be pleased. The measures are still being drafted, and are not expected to be implemented soon. Attorney General says investigation of Biden classified documents is complete. Yahoo! Special counsel Robert Hur has concluded his investigation into classified documents found at President Joe Biden's home and office. Attorney General Merrick Garland informed congressional leaders that Hur has submitted his final report and is working with the White House to redact any items that may involve executive privilege. The White House expects the review to be complete by the end of the week. Hur's report is not expected to recommend charges be filed. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friendly neighborhood 6 doctor here, coming to you live from the 6th dimension with all the latest news. Today, we have a variety of stories to cover, from politics to international relations, and even a little bit of gaffes. So let's dive right in, shall we? First up, we have an article from The Guardian highlighting the potential mistake of Joe Biden's decision not to run for president. At 78 years old, Biden would be the oldest president in U.S. history if he were to win the nomination in 2020. This could be a liability in a race against Donald Trump, who is 72. Looks like Trump might have found himself a Biden attack line on a silver platter. In the world of renewable energy, solar company CubicPV has scrapped its plans for a silicon wafer factory in the U.S. due to declining product prices and increasing construction costs. This is a setback for the Biden administration's goal of creating a solar energy supply chain. Looks like China will continue to dominate the world of wafer production, at least for now. Moving on to politics, we have the story of Ryan Binkley, a businessman and pastor who is still running for the Republican presidential nomination, despite his minuscule support. In Nevada, he hovers around 1%. Binkley believes he is supposed to run for president and keep sharing his message. Well, at least he's persistent. The Biden administration's efforts to curb Iranian oil sales are facing economic and election risks. Tightening the screws on Iran's oil sales could result in higher prices and impact Biden's chances of winning a second term. Looks like they'll have to tread carefully on this one. Nikki Haley, a potential rival to Trump, is facing challenges as she tours California to drum up support. Even some of her most ardent supporters don't see a path for her. Looks like Haley might have a tough time overtaking the former president. In a congressional report, it has been revealed that U.S. venture capital firms have invested at least $3 billion in Chinese technology companies that allegedly support the Chinese military and its repression of minorities. The report calls on the Biden administration to restrict U.S. investment in these firms. Looks like the U.S.-China relationship continues to be a complex one. Shifting gears to North Carolina, we have Gabe Esparza, a Democrat running for the position of state treasurer, highlighting the state pension fund as the biggest issue he would shape if elected. Esparza criticized the current treasurer for underperforming and proposed shifting more cash into higher return investments. Looks like he's got some big plans if he gets elected. In the world of legal battles, the Supreme Court in the United States is hearing arguments over whether Donald Trump is eligible to run for a second term due to his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Looks like Trump's legal troubles continue to follow him. And finally, we have the news that Marianne Williamson has suspended her campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination. She criticized Democrats for pushing an anti-Trump narrative and suggested that Trump would win the 2024 general election. Looks like she's calling it quits for now. Well, folks, that's all the news for today. I hope you enjoyed our little journey through the headlines. As always, I encourage you to share your thoughts and questions. What do you think of Biden's age as a potential liability? Should the U.S. restrict investment in Chinese firms? And what are your thoughts on Trump's eligibility to run for a second term? Let's keep the discussion going. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.